Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Jason Loebach with Chitkowski Law Offices. I'm here today at the offices of PCA and the Plumbing Council to talk a little about sexual harassment policies required on public construction jobs in the state of Illinois. First issue topic is, what is sexual harassment? Basically, sexual harassment comes down to three different categories. First, any type of categorization, conduct, or categorization, conduct, or any term of that might be placed on employment based on sex, gender, sexual tendencies, what have you. Second is same thing, but when it comes to employment terms, raises, promotions, anything of that nature, using any kind of sexual preferences, what gender, anything of that nature in making those employment decisions. And the third category may not be immediately considered sexual harassment, but any kind of conduct that is focused on a particular gender, not on another. So for example, if women are treated a certain way in the workplace that men are not, if the woman on jobs like her, guys are constantly stealing her tools, but they are not stealing all the guys' tools, that's sexual harassment because the guys are harassing the girl because of her gender. So while it might not be harassment of a sexual nature, it is harassment because of the person's sex, and so it falls under the sexual harassment heading. So like I said, there's a broad range of activities that can constitute sexual harassment, whether it be sexually suggestive remarks, gesturing, verbal abuse, innuendo, gyration, gestures, what have you. All these things, it can fall under the sexual harassment category. Sexual harassment also doesn't need to be directed just at a particular person. It can be directed at a group of people. Person A might be targeted one day, person B might be targeted another day, person C another day, then B, then A, C, A. That's all a pattern of harassment that needs to be addressed in a policy. And like I said, non-sexual conduct can also fall under harassment if it's conduct that is being taken because of a person's gender and retaliation of a person's gender. Okay. So what is a sexual harassment policy require? Basically in Illinois, all public construction jobs. If you're a prime contractor on a public construction job for any state, municipality, any governmental agency in the state of Illinois, you need to have a written sexual harassment policy in place. In the city of Chicago, all contractors and subcontractors are required to have a written sexual harassment policy in place. As a part of the bidding process, the Department of Procurement for the City of Chicago can ask for a copy of those policies in the bidding process. It's not in the bidding documents right now, but it can be asked. So basically, if you're doing public work, you need to have a sexual harassment policy in place. What is required in the sexual harassment policy? Up until a few months ago, it was really straightforward. The state of Illinois had a list of what needed to get put in the sexual harassment policy. The City of Chicago put out their ordinance, amended it, and added some things to it. So basically, there are 9 different things. A statement of the illegality of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is prohibited by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and by the Illinois Human Rights Act. Also requires a definition. A sexual harassment policy must have a definition of sexual harassment, which can be found in the Illinois Human Rights Act. Next, the policy must include examples of descriptive behaviors of sexual harassment, things that you might see in your workplace. It does not have to be an exhaustive, comprehensive list, just a list with just some examples of what can constitute sexual harassment. And then a mechanism for registering complaints with the company. Who to go to, how they're going to be addressed, which kind of gets into the complaint process. Also, the penalties must be identified. How are you going to penalize employees that are found to have been engaging in sexual harassing conduct, sexual harassing activities? Part of that penalties added by the City of Chicago is that those penalties must include sexual harassment training, which begs the question: if the employee is terminated, does that sexual harassment training need to be provided? I guess it would be no. But sexual harassment training needs to be included as part of the penalties for people that are found to be engaged in sexual harassing conduct. Additionally, the legal recourses available through the Illinois Department of Human Rights and the Human Rights Commission need to be included in part of your policy. There's a complaint procedure that employees can file with the Illinois Department of Human Rights that needs to be spelled out as part of your policy, which we'll get into a bit later. And then directions on how to contact the Illinois Department of Human Rights. And finally, there needs to be language that any person making a complaint of sexual harassing conduct will not be retaliated against in any fashion for making those complaints. So these are the big processes that must be addressed in the complaint investigation process. A, how is a complaint registered? 2, a determination of complaint. Does the complaint of conduct amount to sexual harassment under your policy? 3, potential resolutions of the complaint. 4, if the complaint cannot be resolved, who is the investigative point person? And then what is the investigative process? So registering a complaint. Sexual harassment policies have to identify, not by name, but by position, who is the person that employees should inform of any complaints regarding sexual harassment in the workplace. It also, in addition to identifying a specific job title person, whether it be your office manager or what have you, if it's that office manager that is being complained of, who is the secondary person to report complaints to? So there needs to be, so let's just say we want to use the office manager. If the office manager is the person that complaints should be reported to, who is the office manager's boss and that person's boss? So there is a chain. If the people that, if the persons to whom complaints are to be reported to are the people being complained of. So all those individuals in the chain of command need to be identified from the reporting person, the person to whom complaints should be reported to. Typically, as I said here, your supervisors, managers of the identified person. Now, determination of complaint. This is something that was added by the City of Chicago Ordinance, and basically what a determination of a complaint is an initial review of the complaint by your company's designated person to make a decision: does this conduct amount to sexual harassment under our policy? So, agree with me. Is it now? The Illinois Human Rights Act sets forth the definition of sexual harassment, which should be included in your policy. It is found in Section 102 of the Human Rights Act. And using that definition of sexual harassment, looking at the specific actions complained of and determining from an objective perspective whether those complaints and the complaint of conduct meet that definition of sexual harassment. If there is a determination that the allegations do not amount to a violation of the policy, then there's no need to pursue an investigation, and the complaining person needs to be notified of that determination. If it is determined by your designated person that the complaint of conduct, if true, would constitute sexual harassment as defined by your policy, then a determination needs to be made as to what's the best way to proceed. And there's some options besides a full-out investigation. First off is mediation. And a lot of you probably heard of mediation from in contract disputes or project disputes. It's kind of the same thing. having your designated person reach out and see if you can sit down, whether it be with a third party or with a designated person in your company, and try to resolve these issues in a manner that all persons involved understand what the conduct was that was complained of, why that conduct is wrong, how that conduct affects not only the victim employee, but also the workplace, job sites in general, and how we can resolve these issues so that way there can be a harmonious relationship going forward. The mediation process can include a lot of different things, whether it be going through the allegations, the procedures, but most importantly of all these things are follow-up procedures. It's one thing to sit down, go through things, and come up with a plan of action and how conduct's going to be addressed, but more importantly is the follow-up. It's easy to say, go ahead, don't do this again, but it's what procedures are going to be put in place to make sure that that conduct is not being perpetrated going forward. In my mind, that's probably the most important. Because as employers, what you want is a stable work environment. And these types of complaints can really cause upheaval in your workforce and cause you to lose some important employees if not properly addressed. These follow-up procedures not only protect the people that were involved in the individual incident, they also protect the rest of your workforce that may not have reported these actions, but let them know that, hey, this company is making sure that these actions are being addressed and are being taken seriously, and we followed up on a process going forward. Another possible option in resolving complaints of sexual harassment conduct is an intervention. Kind of like a TV show. Bringing the person into the office saying, hey, we've had complaints of sexual harassment conduct by you. These are serious actions that we take seriously as a company. We want to sit down with you and try to resolve this, and we think it's really important. And there, you can suggest and try to work out various different things, whether it be counseling, whether it be meetings between the parties, whether it be sexual harassment training, but making up a plan of action that you are going to insist that the perpetrating employee follow. And again, that there's a follow-up plan in place so that the victims know this is being taken seriously and that they know that they're in a safe, healthy work environment. Because that's really what this policy is about, is promoting this safe, healthy work environment. If a complaint can't be resolved informally through mediation, intervention, what have you, then the allegations made in the complaint need to be addressed. So first, identify who's going to be the investigating party. Is it going to be the office manager? Is it going to be somebody else? Whoever that investigating entity, person, group of people is going to be, that needs to be identified. And again, there needs to be a backup. If it's an individual person, a backup as to if the investigating person is the person who's conjured complaint, there needs to be a second person listed. But typically you're going to have someone in your management that needs to be, that's going to be the investigating person. Now, your investigation should include a few different things. A, you like to have a written complaint. You might not always have one. And just because you don't have a written complaint, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't follow up on any verbal complaints that you receive. Because even if a person is afraid to write down their complaints, it doesn't change the fact that you may have a toxic work environment that can cause problems down the road, not just to an individual employee, but to the employee and the rest of your employees. So while I would love to see every complaint and every victim write down their complaints, it might not happen. It's a real world. So let's deal with complaints as they come in, however they come in. So let's say you get a verbal complaint from someone. I'd recommend having an intake sheet. They said sexual harassment complaint form, and that you're a designated person can just write down those complaints. Person X came in on this day at this time and complained of the following actions. then you have a record, and you can use that written form as your written complaint to proceed with your investigation. And then you have a document contemporaneous with a complaint that you can use going forward. And then your policy needs to set forth what is your investigative process going to be. Are you going to look at, you need to look at how could this conduct take place. Is it going to be a job site? Is it going to be emails, or have you? So you need to identify how this process is going to take place. Are you going to look at all conduct, whether that be verbal conversations, whether that be email, whether that be internet usage, what have you? Spell out that all conduct is going to be looked into, how this can be done, who's going to be done, are people going to be interviewed, are computers going to be taken away, are cell phones going to be taken away to be examined? Whatever your process is going to be, you want to spell that out. And you want to give yourself the most rights as you can. If you have issued company cell phones or issued company computers, you want to put people on notice that if there are complaints, the company reserves the right to take the computer for the investigative process, take the cell phone for the investigative process, and go through that information as part of their investigation. If that's not contained in your policy, you might have some invasion of privacy issues. But if you put it up front and put it in there, and the person continues their employment with that in place, then there's that understanding, that acknowledgement of a waiver of that right to privacy in these circumstances. And again, once the report is done, you want to have a summary report put together as to the findings. That report should go through, identify what investigative processes were undertaken, what the conclusion of the investigation was, and what the recommended disciplinary action or actions are. Then the report should be sent to not just the employee complainant, but also to their supervisor. And then follow-ups, require follow-ups. Unless the employee is terminated because of the conduct, follow up on whatever those disciplinary actions are, and make sure that those follow-ups are mandatory, and that whoever the person in charge of doing those follow-ups is followed up on to enforce those follow-up procedures. Penalties for violating sexual harassment policy. I can start at the bottom. The City of Chicago requires sexual harassment training as part of their ordinance. It's undefined, that it could go two different ways. I recommend, if you have an employee if you've determined to engage in sexual harassment conduct, you've gone through the investigation process, and you said, hey, your conduct was sexual harassment in nature, and we're going to penalize you for it, sexual harassment training should be included as part of the discipline, unless that employee is terminated because of the conduct. The person might not realize, for whatever reason, that their conduct was sexual harassment in nature. That might seem obvious to you and I. That person just might not realize. He might just be oblivious to what he's doing or she is doing. So that training should be an important part of any discipline for a finding of sexual harassing conduct. Besides that, this one can range from anything from just a written reprimand to a suspension without pay, all the way to termination. But that's going to depend on your investigative process, and it should be included in your policy as to that you have the right, as a part of the investigation disciplinary process of sexual harassing activities, that the discipline can include up to termination. So you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're required to issue a written warning for something that is outrageous conduct, and you pin yourself into a box. So you want to leave yourself open to a wide range of penalties. Sexual harassment training. As I said, this was added by the City of Chicago, and that's why I look at it as both ends. A, I require as part of any disciplinary process. It's important that all of your management and supervisory personnel have sexual harassment training so they know what to look for and how to identify sexual harassment conduct and how to deal with complaints of it. The policy is supposed to be a document that not just outlines procedures, but also gives the opportunity for support to implement these procedures. And the best way to do that is to give the people that you're going to identify as the ones in charge of implementing this process, to give them the training they need to do it. So they're not just going into this blind. Because again, this is your workplace that you're talking about. This is your work environment. This is what you've built up, what you put your blood, sweat, tears, and money into. And this is just something that you can use to help protect that investment, protect your company. And so providing that training to your management, supervisor, and officials is something that can really, is a good tool to protect that event, besides just a requirement for City of Chicago projects. The last thing of substance is that your policy needs to articulate that anyone complaining of being a victim of sexual harassment will not be retaliated against for any employment purposes or retaliated against by the employer for any reason for making any complaints or allegations of sexual harassment conduct. One of the main reasons that people don't report sexual harassment conduct is A, they're afraid. And two, they're afraid of being fired or being not given that promotion or not given that raise, taken out of the field or taken off a particular job. Your policy should say, hey, that's not going to happen. The people that are making the complaints are the victims, and they should feel that they will be protected. And this is just one way of giving them that protection. Again, as I said at the beginning, State of Illinois requires that your policy set out with the information for employees to know that they can file complaints for harassment with the Illinois Department of Human Rights and the Human Rights Commission, and a little bit of the information about when those complaints can be filed, which is 180 days for a complaint of conduct, unless it's ongoing action. So that needs to be included in your policy. And also, the contact information for the applicable State of Illinois agencies. And they're just listed here: Department of Human Rights, Illinois Human Rights Commission, and the U.S. Equal Opportunity Commission, the EOC. And that's it. The Illinois Human Rights Act and the recent Chicago Ordinance are pretty straightforward as to what needs to be included. The State of Illinois actually has a sample policy that can be found online. It doesn't take in all the discrimination requirements and the sexual harassment training requirements of the City of Chicago Ordinance, but it does include very good language as to examples of sexual harassment conduct and all the other items contained earlier on of those 9 points. And again, if you have any information, my contact information is here. Feel free to contact me with any questions you may have. Again, my name is Jason Loebach with Chitkowski Law Offices, and I want to thank the PCA and the Plumbing Council for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you.